I'm going to start with the Butterfly Boys in the Civil War. Now, how many people in here are history nuts? Anybody? Oh, I got a couple of history nuts. How about Civil War? You too, huh? This is Civil War. I'm working on the Revolutionary War at the moment for the same company. They want to do, they're going to honor, I think next July 4th is the anniversary.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's it. I just hate the way this is so. Well, anyway, let me start. This is how I started and my connection. Hi, Bruce. Come on in. If you know how to turn out the lights, let somebody know. But I'll wait till Bruce gets settled. This is the Upper Lehigh Cemetery in Lehigh, Pennsylvania. It took me, now, Upper Lehigh, Pennsylvania is maybe smaller than this whole complex. There's a road, And I finally stopped the lady with the shopping bag and said, "Where's the cemetery?" "Well, you go up through the woods, and then there's a fork in the road," but she didn't tell me which one. So I found out a cousin of mine who came from Germany and joined the Texas military and probably was at Gettysburg, and then in his unit, that light just went out all by itself. He's buried up there, and his name is Christian Lubrecht. And I found out with my last name, you can go to the next one. With my last name, if you got the last name Lubrecht, you're related. We found him in the phone book in Germany, all over the place. Nobody knows why, but my dad told me that. His father told him that, and it's just crossed paths. Christian Lubrecht migrated to, of all places, Hazleton, Pennsylvania, where his brother, Louis Lubrecht, or Ludwig, was the first burgess in there. And it was a German Lutheran church. A lot of Germans came over. The next one. So this is the book and the butterfly flag. Now, the First American Hussars is the name of this group. The flag is now in the state library in New Jersey, but I'll tell you in a moment why they're called butterflies. And keep your eye on that little red neckerchief. The 3rd Cavalry still wears it. Come on in, Sally. Plenty of seating by Bruce.
There's a chair over there, too.
There's a chair over here. She's got her banana. No, Sally has a banana. All right. So this is a painting, and what they did, the idea was if you get a real snappy uniform, everybody will sign up. So let's go to the next one. This is an actual painting of Charles Bartlett. One of his relatives had it done. It's by an author named Keith Rocco. And again, this is a very particular troop. Take a look at the hat. We'll talk about that later. There's no brim, and also all the gold braid. And basically in the Civil War, that gold braid were musicians' uniforms, and the musicians were used. Well, there's that. Oh, all right. So go ahead. Let's start at the beginning. What's a hussar? This is the European hussars, and that's what they named him after. There's a New York version of this too. This is likely from the old Serbian word hussar, meaning brigand. Also, the hats are called Totenkopf, which in German means dead head or death's head. And then they wore that jacket over there. They wore the fur hat plus the jacket over the shoulder. So this is a hussar from Germany. This one's from Poland, I think. The European hussars look something like this. And there was a tremendous movement at the beginning of 1800. Of the 1800s, the romance of the cavalry. And you'll probably all know how romantic it is. There's immediate seating by Bruce. We just can't turn the lights out. We don't know how. All right. So this is what the hussars, European hussars, looked like. And basically, they fought in Europe and all the romantic European battles. And for example, this is the romance of the cavalry. How many of you here have read Ivanhoe? Yeah, Ivanhoe, The Charge of the Light Brigade. Ours is not to reason why, ours is but to do or die. Yeah, we all know that. And that was the cavalry romance. They didn't carry guns. They could carry. Please, go ahead. Every kid, I read these as the cavalry charge was a romantic thing. And so there was a tremendous interest in joining the cavalry. Now, this here is one of the most unpopular moves that Lincoln ever made, one of them. This is the initiation of the draft. Now, imagine a president who decides just to order the draft after he institutes income tax and before he removes habeas corpus in Maryland. I can read you a newspaper article, which I have, saying King Lincoln. Sound familiar?
Yeah.
Yeah, and he, by the way, he didn't ask Congress, he proclaimed. The Emancipation Proclamation is a wonderful thing, but it was never voted on because Congress would have voted it down. So he, on the advice of several, said no. So the draft is coming in now, and each, just like later on, each town has a quota of how many people in the draft. Now, you could get out of it. You could take some guy, I could go to Ray and say, Ray, here's $300, go in the service for me. Which, because of no identity, caused a lot of crookedness going on. So you could buy your way out of the draft, or you could go, or you could desert. This is from Wilkes-Barre. Soldiers wanted for the war in Ramsey's regiment. The regiment would get rounded up by whoever politically was in charge, and they'd fill it out. Well, that's fine. For 3 years of service, they'll be on Thursday, a muster roll in North Branch Hotel in Wilkes-Barre. Well, Wilkes-Barre had a real problem because not only here, you can see with the amount of money you get to go into the draft. This is from an old newspaper, but the cavalry, Lee was down south killing the Union. He was an immense, very good cavalryman. Yeah, roots being in New Jersey. His father, anybody know his father's name? Harry Lighthorse Lee. It was light cavalry, and light cavalry is used for skirmishes, reconnoitering, and so on. So we needed cavalry. So this, by the way, is a reenactment. These guys are still out there. This was taken at Cedar Creek. We no longer can do these. Now, this is the guy who started the whole unit. His name is Andrew J. Morrison. Supposedly, and this is AI, he drank heavily and had been relieved of his command of his former unit, the 26th New Jersey Infantry, for leading in the wrong way during Chancellorsville campaign. None of that is true. Alcohol problems ended his connection to the 3rd in 1864. Go on the next one. All right, this is Andrew Jackson Morrison from Albany, New York, whose father fought in the War of 1812. And little Andrew here would put on his father's hat and get a fake musket and parade back and forth because he wanted to be a soldier. And the story is just incredibly complicated. But if you notice, at one of the battles, he had 2 fingers shot off. So he's always pictured with a glove. The right hand, no glove, left hand, he's missing 2 fingers. Very good. Let me tell you what, it's complicated because basically we don't know that a lot of this happened. For example, do you know the word filibuster?
Yeah.
What does it mean?
Oh, that somebody just keeps talking and talking.
It didn't mean that then. Filibuster there meant go take over a country, people who would go over and take over a country. So there was William Wallace, the filibuster, Narcisco Lopez, we'll talk about in a minute. So what he does at 15 years old, he runs away from home. About 1849, the Mexican War is going on in Matamoros, Mexico. He wants to go. So he goes to Staten Island, of all things, joins up a troop, and his father gets wind of it, goes to Staten Island, grabs the kid, takes him home. Well, that didn't stop him. He ran away again. This time he lied about his age, goes down to Texas, he's 15, and joins General Butler's troop. And it turns out, after the Mexican War is pretty well done, and we don't think much of the Mexican War of 1849 or so, but who was in the Mexican War but Robert E. Lee and his friend Ulysses S. Grant? Whoa, and a lot of other people, Longstreet, all the Confederate generals too. So he goes with Butler's body back to Louisiana, and he wants to, get into it. So he joins the this guy, Narcisco Lopez. You ever hear of him? He decided, be ready for this, to take over Cuba. So he gets an independent militia and gets a couple of boats, and Morrison is on the last ship in. And they're going to take over Cuba because they figure it's a great place to run slaves. He offers Robert E. Lee, if you give me $100,000, I'll give you a free plantation in Cuba. Well, nobody told the Cubans. He gets there, and no matter what he does, he gets soundly thrashed. And the last boat that Morrison is doesn't land because they figure he's in trouble. Well, he was in enough trouble after several battles and loss to be garroted to death. They put him on a chair and they tighten a screw around his neck till he stopped breathing. Meanwhile, Morrison is going home back to Florida. But has he had enough? No. He joins William Walker, the famous filibuster. Now, Walker dies in 1860, long before the word filibuster. You can see it there as a long-winded speech today. Then it was a mercenary and rogues. He forms an army. Morrison joins the army. He's going to take over Nicaragua, which he did, and gets himself elected the president of Nicaragua. And Morrison, realizing that maybe it's time to go home, the people in Nicaragua decide this guy needs to be executed. He's done. So now Morrison lands in New York, and he makes friends. This building is still there. He makes friends with the Meucci Candle Company on Staten Island, owned by an Italian guy named Meucci. And Meucci is hiding out Giuseppe Garibaldi, who's been exiled from Italy for bringing in, independence. He makes friends with Garibaldi. And he's working in New York at some kind of menial job in New York City. By the way, this house here is the Meucci Candle Factory house and the Garibaldi Museum as we speak. It's at Staten Island. And Garibaldi, as you know, goes back to Italy, and he is joined by Morrison, who decides, I'm going to be fighting in your army. And that's where I think he got his inspiration for the Hussars. So the minute the Civil War breaks out, where do you think Morrison does? But he comes back home. And he proposes, and here's the letter, to the state of New Jersey to form a troop of cavalry. But interestingly enough, with the draft, New Jersey is the only state that no one got drafted. It was a totally volunteer army all over the place. And if you throw a rock around here, 3 out of every 4 men was in the Civil War, Union Army. Well, most of them. Some of them weren't. The whole thing, too, centers around slavery. Lopez thought a great place to get slaves, a place to sell them, because it was forbidden by the British. And also in Nicaragua, they thought this would be a place to foster slavery. Not in the sense of growing things, but in the sense of sale of people. And by the way, at the same time, the Irish people from Ireland and the potato famine were being sold as indentured servants in Cuba as white slaves. And that has been left out of our history to a degree. So anyway, he writes, and he gets permission to form this unit of cavalry. And what he's going to do is he's going to put them in fancy uniforms. What?
Oh, okay.
She's good. We got it. She's going to sit in the wheelie thing. Don't hurt yourself, please. All right. So they decide they're going to get a volunteer regiment. Now, here's the thing that, again, people don't think about. You could enlist in the Civil War for 3 months, 3 years as regular army, or for the duration. Well, they found out that this group of cavalrymen is going to get paid a signing bonus of $850. It's a year's pay. And cousin Christian from Hazleton, brother died. He wanted to go home, and they told him, no, you got a year's salary. Just, spend the money. So these were the recruiting posters, which I really like. No long marches. Volunteers' attention. Now is the time to enlist. No long marches and no the sword to what is it? The sword, a horse to ride, and a sword to carry, whatever. Now, if you think this is hanging in Newton, now you know in Newton where Hayek's Market is.
Mhm.
You go behind it, that's where these were recruited. It was Anderson Hotel, which is no longer there. And everybody signed up. Now, the other problem they had, they have no ID. So a lot of guys signed up several times under several names and then deserted. 1,200 signed up, 400 finished the war, and there weren't that many casualties. Go ahead. So Frank Leslie had an illustrated newspaper in everybody's home, and he publishes this picture as a recruiting poster in these snappy uniforms. You're going to have a blue cape with an orange lining. Really? And the hat, they took the regular Civil War hat, cut the brim off it, put gold all over everything, took the musician's jacket, and then they also wanted, this is something I never thought, the horses would be 15 hands high. I don't know much about horses, that's a big horse. And the rider should be under 145 pounds and under 5'6", because he could sit on the horse, be lighter. Horses. And I always wondered, by the way, this is how they signed you up. There would be your name, and I have it printed out below. Description of the company. This is G. These are still in Washington. That's where I got them at the National Archives, and they have not yet been digitized. But this is an ID. It will tell you your occupation, your age, what you did for a living, and where you came from. Do you know how many of these people in the Civil War named Hans Schmidt from Germany? Many. And what the draft, I don't know what you'd call them. And by the way, this is the inception of the CIA, because Lafayette Baker was his name, was discovering that what they're doing is taking a wagon load of these immigrants, walking them in, enlisting them, then walking them out the back door, put them in the wagon, go to the next station, because there was no record between the stations. And then when you looked at your company, maybe half of them were missing because they bailed out. So they'd get $300 or whatever the pay was, give half to this guy, and off they went. So they had a real problem. Lafayette Baker, later on in the war, disguised himself as a recruit and then arrested people. Yeah, part of the CIA is Lafayette Baker, and then Pinkerton. Pinkerton's detective was the security division. All right. They all gathered, they all recruited, and they were told to report to the Camp Bayard South. This is in Trenton. It's no more. This is Camp Bayard, not the Bayard Barracks, which are revolutionary down there. It's right on the river. And I think it was an old cracker barrel factory. I think this was it. I found an old picture of it. And they put all the men in there, got them these snappy new uniforms. But they ran into a trouble. Captain Morrison got into it with someone from the regular army. Regular army hated the new, and the same way in World War II, they hated the 90-day wonders, the West Point boys, And a lot of these West Point, they didn't like the new recruits. So one guy rides in, starts yelling at Morrison. What do you think Morrison does? He gets into a fist fight. Immediately puts a black mark on himself. They wanted to court-martial him for this, but no, he went on. Now, this is all the spots in New Jersey where these guys came from and into Pennsylvania. Look, they were all over here because, and some companies would get out after 3 years service and then re-enlist. The Cumberland Grays from South Jersey down around Greenwich down there, they enlisted as a unit, all of them, and made money. Now, this is the woman, and this is something that I have not found written anywhere. A woman got about $6 per month, and the soldier got maybe 15. He had to buy his own uniforms. If they got damaged or shot up, you had to buy them anyway. And then I found in the New Jersey archives the direct deposit method of the Civil War. And I thought, are you kidding me? What they would do is have their money sent to a banker and put it in the bank, like in Dover, and then the wife could go draw the money. And later on, after the war, the problem was the pensions. And that we'll talk about in a bit. The pensions were, I would say, not given, or they were not issued until 1890. And in 1890, all the widows were allowed to apply for a pension. And then you can see where they were listed. They got the money they were deserving. By the way, anybody ever wonder how the Confederates ever got a pension? I'm puzzled. My Aunt Civilla was the granddaughter of a Confederate Georgia trooper, and he lived on the pension till 1936. And what they usually did after the war, and this little sidebar, 18-year-old and 17-year-old girls would marry 50 and 60-year-olds because they could live off the pension. Right. When the old boy croaked, that was why. So actually, her grandfather fought in the 11th Georgia, and they lived on that pension from 1865 to 1936. And the pension was paid by the U.S. government to the Confederate soldier. So when I read about this, I say, and you can see them what they did now. There were women who were camp followers too. The women followed the camp. They did this since the Revolution. Here, they picked through the bodies on the battlefield for money. Soldiers sewed the money inside their clothing. Also, if you've seen the photos that the Confederates were barefoot with the white feet, they weren't barefoot. Their boots were stolen. Simple as that.
Right.
There you go. Next. All right. This is the ethnicity. I love this. There were 355 native Germans, which was a problem because they didn't speak any English. They got off the boat, we fight for, 179 Irish, Swiss. And can you imagine these two? Don't deny them their daily booze ration. Swiss, French, Belgian, Polish, Hungarian, English, one Italian. No, they had their own regiment. There was an Italian regiment in New York. 2,100 enlisted and 400 finished. The occupations, laborers, that was all on their muster. Carpenters, blacksmiths, shoemakers, sailors, molders, bakers, butchers, clerks, machinists, masons, painters, brewers, printers, and one actor. Actors were something else again. They could spy. The actors were the spies of the Civil War. They could travel untouched. John Wilkes Booth went back and forth. And if you think about the railroad. The railroad in the Civil War was one track that went that way, and with an engine that came back on the same track. You went and you came. And all the coal that ran the railroads was in coal country up by Hazleton, Schuylkill County, and there. So that had to be protected. When the draft came, it was awful. Because the draft came to Pennsylvania, they had draft riots so bad that we sent in 3 military troops, the 11th Infantry from down here. And Lincoln said, you got to do something because if they got the coal, we can't travel. So we had 3 infantry units in Pennsylvania during the Civil War to quell the draft riots, which were blamed later on the Molly Maguires. And also, men were getting death threats. If you go into the army, we will kill you. We will kill your family. There were murders in Audenried, Eckley, and so forth. So, not a good thing. But this is how this worked. John Walmuth came from Germany. He was a teamster, and he came from the town of Roda, and he was 28 years old, 5'8", fair, gray brown. That was the only ID you had. He enlisted December 29th in Camden, and was missing since September 24th, not 241, 1864. A lot of these guys were missing for a lot of reasons. 1, they were in a hospital, terrible records. 2, they ran away. 3, they were killed. 4, they went home. Okay, this was no ID. This is what the face, I collected a bunch of pictures of the face of this guy's from right up here, and there's more to the story. These are all the battles, and I got to tell you, I'm not interested in who fought where. And you reach these reenactors and scholars who say, well, if they'd gone up on that hill, we would have won. And the truth, I got a letter from a man who said, this book is terrible. You don't tell about the troop movements. I don't care about the troop movements. I'm more interested in the people, what happened to them, why they signed up. Now, this regiment was attached to the Cavalry 9th Corps, Army of the Potomac. And unfortunately, the first commander they ran into was Burnside. We all know Burnside. was organized at Camp Bayard. These are all the battles they were at. At first, they were not put into any battle at all because look at the outfit. And people said, "Oh, you're a bunch of yellow wasps. You look like a bunch of butterflies," because it was orange on the inside. I don't want to wear an orange cape into battle, but okay. And so they proved themselves. They took that and adopted themselves as the Butterfly Boys. That's why the butterfly in the flag. And they were at all these major battles, all the way down through here. And again, there are skirmishes that we don't know about. They end up in Petersburg, sieging Lee. This is following Lee. They end up at Appomattox and Lee's surrender. But they then go to Washington, and there they march in the muster out parade, Lincoln's funeral, and old commanding Custer, who we'll talk about, was watching Mary Surratt get hung for the assassination. This is the chaplain, John Frazee. Here's a picture of one of the cavalrymen. He was very important in this because they carried the chaplain with them for whatever reason. By the way, he carried a gun. There were 12 German barons. Now, I have no idea how 12 German barons ended up. Alexander von Bonadowski. They all came over to fight. They'd see that the war would go and they'd just go fight it. So, you want to help? And that happened during the American Revolution. I just discovered a Spanish general, and Spain was funding the war too. This is Adolf von Bulow, and these von Bulows, they turn up again in World War I and II. Alexander, and you can see all 12 of them with their stuff. This guy, Adolf von Mechel, and they were officers because these were trained military. In Germany, in England, you bought your commission. In Germany, you earned it. So, go ahead. And we had Prussian soldiers, 26 from Hanover. Companies K, L, and M were predominantly German speaking. That was the problem, including the regiment quartermaster and many non-commissioned officers. Who did I know? My cousin Christian Lubrecht was the quartermaster, and a friend of mine who's the Titanic expert, Charlie Haas, and you'll see him on History Channel. Charlie's grandfather was the butcher of all that. And I met some other people in my own life, and friends never knew that they were connected. I love this guy. This is a Private Friedrich Yeckel of Easton, Pennsylvania. I'm hoping I found this diary in the National Archives, and it's sitting on my computer waiting to be. Now you can read this stuff with the computer. But Yeckel was an artilleryman in Europe, and so Custer, he's fighting under Custer. Now they get later on and would go where Burnside loses them. But later on, Custer, they're fighting under George Armstrong Custer. Let me tell you, they loved him. And so Yeckel was an artilleryman, but they transferred him to the artillery because he was wounded and he was also useless. He gets his foot blown off, and he opens a shoe store here in Easton, yeah. And I've had his great-great-grandson in class, of all things. Go ahead. This is Burnside. Now, this guy was a problem. I don't know if you ever see, we call them sideburns today, but that's because of Burnside. Now, Burnside is in charge at Fredericksburg and Antietam, and he is a total foul up. I mean, he really messes things up. And there is, that's where Morrison gets in trouble. Morrison's got the troops. At this point, they were still backup. They were not in battle. If you know anything about the Fredericksburg battle, the St. Mary's Heights, the Union is getting slaughtered because there's so much delay as we're going. And Lincoln is cycling generals through as fast as he can, and one is worse than the next. So they find Morrison asleep on his horse, and they said he's drunk. They court-martial him and bounce him out, and someone else, the colonel who replaced him, is buried right here in Belvedere. But his men stood up for him and said, look, he'd been up for 3 nights because of the mess of this general. We love him. Why do that? But he decided not to. not to fight it. He was not drunk. How did I find this out? Morrison married, but had no children, but he had an illegitimate child. And the illegitimate child's ancestor is a Moravian in Nazareth who I met. He's a funeral director. And he gave me all the inside scoop saying, this guy didn't drink at all. And he was really railroaded out, as in many cases, somebody wanted his job. So here is he's assigned to General Burnside's Ninth Corps. And this was a mess. Lincoln went from Burnside to McMillan until he finally got to when he knew. All right, go ahead. This is a list. Now, the reason for this list. Thanks, Jenny. Come on in. There's plenty of room. Just move over. Immediate seating in the rear. Home to yourself. So anyway, these are the list of battles. Now they asked the new colonel, because they were so confused as to where I was for my pension, because there was no record of it. We'll see why in a minute. Colonel Robeson is a list of the battles they fought. He did this in 1871. Colonel Robeson and his brother are buried in Belvedere. His brother was the Secretary of the Navy who was exited because he stole $100,000. And he's right there. Warren County's own. Here we go. This is what the cavalry charge according to the newspapers. No photography, but the invention of the telegraph is what screwed everything up. If you would retreat, by the time you got to the other end of the battlefield, it was in the Herald News, the day, New York Herald. Horace Greeley, of all things, was the one who put that together. They really went after everybody. No matter what you did, it was wrong. And who were the newspaper people? Horace Greeley, Carl Schurz, Joseph Pulitzer, who was a homeless Hungarian, but more on that. Now, this is from the local paper. They were put under General Sheridan. Little Phil's maybe 5'2", and Sheridan's ride at the Battle of Winchester made all the newspapers. And at this point, Morrison was still in charge. Our friends will note the necessity of directing their letters to us according to the new arrangement as follows: 3rd New Jersey kept 1st Brigade, and so on. And this was you'll see at the bottom something very interesting too. You see Manitou there? None of the writers used their real names. Manitou's in all the papers. Nobody knows who he was. And the fashion was to use a phony name. Now we all know George Armstrong Custer before he had long hair. Let me tell you why, and that's Custer and his dog. He was the most effective self-promoting advertising general on the planet. Now, why does he have long hair? He was dating his wife-to-be, and he had shoulder-length hair, and her father didn't like long hair. Now, this is back in 1850s. Well, no, 1860s. He took time out to the war to get married, but when he went to ask the father for his wife's hand, he got his hair cut. So this is just about when he was married. By the way, he was at West Point. He was the last in his class. He wrote more books promoting himself. And after he died, his wife continued to promote. I met once Andy Custer, who's his great granddaughter, great-granddaughter, the same deal. Now, what kind of rifles were they carrying?
Here we go.
Bobby likes it. This is one I used to own. This is Christian Lubrecht's Sharps carbine. What had happened is people were losing rifles, stealing rifles, so you put your name on it. Because you couldn't go to the quartermaster and say, I want another rifle, and they're going to buy it. And they'd pick them up on the battlefield or whatever they could. So what this had inside here, he scratched his name. And that's how the dealer found me. But the problem with it was expensive. And we sold it expensive. It was a single shot rifle. Now, it was battle used. These soldiers wore a bandolier with a loop on it hooked the gun to it so they could shoot and ride at the same time. But how do you load it? This had a bullet with a cloth background on it, a single shot. Well, come 1864, about August, Custer decides this isn't working. So he goes out and gets the whole troop a Spencer repeating rifle, which was 8 shots. And then he told his less adventurous soldiers, you hold the horses, the rest of you get behind trees. So he had the lowest casualty rate. I think it was 4. But he was still a knucklehead. Meanwhile, General Wilson in 64 gets 40 guys captured and sent to Andersonville. And if you notice, just from Civil War, these are called bow ties. What they did is they would heat the rails to tear up the railroad, then throw it in a river so they would twist, so they couldn't be reused. So the bow ties here, you can see it. So Wilson takes this raid. He's going to destroy the railroad. Oops, they all got captured and spent time at Andersonville, which was the horrible prison. Go ahead. Now, Lincoln is up for re-election. His chances look terrible. So when the Democrats say no soldiers should be allowed to vote, you know why? How are they going to vote if they're on the battlefield? So Lincoln grants these soldiers a 2-week leave. They go home and they vote again. This, by the way, is again another Lubrecht from Brooklyn, New York. It's his portrait of Lincoln. He published The Life of Lincoln in German 1 week after Lincoln was shot. By the way, that biography was written by a alternative lifestyle woman minister from, and yeah, they had it back then too. Now, this group, Third New Jersey Cavalry, this is their first major battle. This is the Battle of Winchester, and this is what it looks like today. It's a huge battlefield in Winchester, Virginia. This is what it used to look like. I'm sorry about the light. Back then, these are the black and whites taken shortly after the war. Badger. This is Opequon Creek as we see it today, and you can still see some of the evidences of where the men crossed the river. That was another battle. This is what you can see the road here of Opequon Creek, again in Virginia, where the 3rd New Jersey distinguished themselves. This is what's left of this battlefield, of the 3rd battlefield of Winchester. There were 3 battles, and this is the 3rd battle, and 8 September 19th, 1864, retreating south. This is Lee. Rutherford B. Hayes and William McKinley served in this engagement of the Union Army. Yes, Bob.
Getting back to the first photograph of the road going through, they can't leave history alone. I mean, that was like the war battlefield. They can't leave it.
They really, and let me tell you what, Bobby, it's part of another talk, but what they're doing right now is restoring Gettysburg to its original topography. They were very fortunate because General Meade was an engineer who mapped one of the Great Lakes and built all the lighthouses along New Jersey shore. And what they're doing is raising the level. They're finding what the level it is. They're taking the trees out where they weren't, putting trees back where they are. And there's a big movement for that. The problem is now, the further south you go, the less interest there is. Go ahead. Now, 4,000 men lost their lives at this battle, which is one of the largest battles. And it doesn't get the attention that Gettysburg gets, because if you figure 4,000 men lost their lives here, in Gettysburg in the wheat field, 4,000 men lost their lives in the wheat field alone. And that's what it looked like back then. That's July 31st, about 1890 or so. Go ahead. Now, that's the monument. Now, this is what the newspapers would put back then of the Battle of Winchester. And years ago, we went to a reenactment of this battle, which they can't do anymore. And this is the Berryville Pike, which is now, I think, United States Highway 7. But by the way, macadam highways were invented during the Civil War by a guy named Macadam. The Brigadier General command the dash. And this is a commendation from about the Third Cavalry in 1864. And they had to get, in making this capture, too much praise cannot be awarded to the Third Ohio. And if they put this in the newspaper and you actually would read it, that's the way you got it. Okay. What do we got coming up
Oh,
here?
you set up a trend.
This is the Battle of Cedar Creek. And years ago, Thea and I went
Sorry.
to this, go back to this reenactment. They can't do it anymore because they actually fired guns and horses. You see this line? You're looking out over Cedar Creek. We think Custer was all the way in the back, which is now a corporate complex. And the problem is you can't see any troops coming at you. And they got in real trouble with Cedar Creek because the Confederates were starting to swarm over them, surprise attack them. So Sheridan makes this famous ride down to there, and they win. Go ahead, watch this. This is what Cedar Creek looks like from the top. But next slide. Now you can see the Unions camped down in here, and they were in a very bad place for a surprise attack. Sheridan comes this way. Yeckel, our friend Yeckel, drew the battlefield view of his idea of Cedar Creek. By the tires is now, if you look at this, you can see that same line, and all of a sudden, you see the Confederate troops coming up on you, which you hadn't seen before. So it was kind of a mess, but the Union Army did okay. This was the Confederate encampment. This is a reenactment, obviously, but this is pretty much what it would look like. And what is this? The fight at Cedar Creek. The newspapers sent illustrators down to draw the pictures. You can see they had no photos. Go ahead. This is Cedar Creek. I got fancy with this. Now, this is Yeckel's drawing of a prisoner being led out to a firing squad. The Civil War punishments were awful. If you were a skulking deserter and they caught you, they would put a wooden thing around your neck saying skulking deserter. Or you had to sit on an open barrel for the whole day. Now, the barrel has no cover on it. You're sitting on the rim. Also, if you were caught deserting, you were executed. Now, there's a story with Custer, which has not been told much. And let me give you a quick run on this. Custer's men were out looking for bushwhackers. They were local ambushers who would shoot at the troops. So they get to a farm, and there's a special needs young man with a squirrel rifle. And they say to him, "Are you a bushwhacker?" He has no idea what that is. And so they decide he's a bushwhacker. They capture him, and Custer's going to execute him. So they tie a rope around his neck and walk him 5 miles to the execution spot. With him goes his local minister. And the minister is saying to Custer, "You can't do this. You can't do this. This is awful." He doesn't know what Custer decides to do it anyway. So the minister turns to him and says, "I'm going to tell you, you do this, you are going to die in a bloody grave." Because he was right. But anyway, go ahead. And the way these skulking deserters, they needed men, so they put them back in. But this is Custer, and he decides to well loved by the men, by the way. Let's go past Custer. This is an execution. Now, he executes Davy Getz, but Sheridan ordered the execution of privates Henry Christian and Henry King. They don't exist. The men did, but they had, what they were doing was enlisting under a phony name and then deserting, and they were doing repeatedly, like 9, 10, 12 times. All they had to do was go to another town, and nobody knew where they were. So what they would do, they would sit him on his coffin over the open grave and then shoot them so he'd fall in. Now, all of these men had blanks in their guns. You didn't know if you actually shot the guy because one of them were loaded. They picked them out of a pile. But that had to be because crooks are crooks. Now, they're chasing Robert E. Lee. This is an Amazon church where Custer and his brother Tom really managed. They're chasing the Confederates all the way down south. Lee is without food. His men are hungry. Um, this is not something Lee ever wanted to do. I don't know how many of you know that Lee was offered the command of the Union Army first? Yeah. And he turned it down. He's from Virginia. Also, the other thing with Lee is after the war, he never wore a uniform again, ever. He would appear, he was at Washington University. Also, his family home and plantation was taken from him by the American government. It's now Arlington National Cemetery. And he never got any money for it. But he would go to the White House to visit his buddy Grant. You figured, okay, go ahead. This is Amelia Courthouse. Again, they're chasing the Confederates, hungry people. Go ahead. And this is Sailor Creek as it looks today. And if you go down there, there's a radio. You can tune your radio into the narrative. It's kind of cool. Go ahead. That's Sailor Creek. And this is Appomattox Courthouse, but not the real one. The courthouse itself was destroyed. 3rd New Jersey is down here. There at the siege of Petersburg, the Confederate soldiers are deserting 100 at a time overnight. And Lee is really in trouble. So they go to Appomattox. He is going to sign the, whatever it is that they did sign, the treaty and agreement. This is a replica of Appomattox. Appomattox Courthouse got destroyed by souvenir hunters. They tore everything out and down. So this is a replica. Lee turns up, beautiful uniform, clean, all turned out in military, and sits under an apple tree. And because the wagons were going by so much, they were cutting ruts in the ground, and you could actually sit there. And in the courthouse, they signed the agreement of the end of the war. And on a table, General Sheridan, buys the table for $50 and gives it to Custer. But where do you think Custer was? In jail. He mouthed off at the sheriff in Appomattox and got thrown in the clay. Kind of typical. But if you go to the next, I ran into someone. This is a piece of the apple tree from Appomattox. And what I ran into, I was in Historical Society in Greenwich, New Jersey. And I said, I'm looking for the 3rd New Jersey Cavalry. And the lady behind me says, I am too. That's my relative. And I have a piece of the apple tree. So we went to her house and I took the picture of the apple tree, which he had inscribed. Turns out we could track his brother, her ancestor down. He became a surgeon in Seattle, Washington. But now, the medical issue. This is
20 after 7.
What is it?
20 after 7.
Is that good, bad, or indifferent?
Indifferent.
I don't know what it's indifferent. Yeah, thanks. These are the wounded, and they were applying for pensions, obviously, if they're wounded. That's a tintype. Go ahead. Here's the problem. Our boy from Hackettstown, New Jersey, Dr. William Whitfield Bowlby, born in Hackettstown. He dies in 1886, but not here. He dies in the Morris Plains Insane Asylum.
Oh.
What happened? We think it was dementia, but he was assigned to Custer. He was Custer's surgeon. And when the war was over and people went, well, Dr. Bowlby knows what my pension. No, Dr. Bowlby doesn't remember what your pension is. You're dead. So that started all the recording, like Yeckel's diary and so forth, to prove that they were wounded or what battle they were to get the pension. And then they would get a lawyer and go to court and get it from the government. But this poor guy, he's graduate of College of Physicians and Surgeons. He entered the Army as a surgeon, 3rd New Jersey. He had popular manners, was very social and fluent. He promoted, but he was assigned to Custer, and there he is. And he was the problem. I'd always heard of him, and I just found him like yesterday, causing a real problem. Because if you go into cemeteries up here in Hackettstown, Phillipsburg, Easton, you will find the graves in this unit. In fact, there's one in Phillipsburg with one of the mortar from Vicksburg, and the guy's buried next to it. It's on a side street. Go ahead. Now, so you're certified. For example, this is my relative, Christian Lubrecht. He's certified that Charles Altmuller was a member of Company M because Company M didn't speak English. So this is another one too. Stockton, General Stockton, saying, please, go ahead. This guy was a member of the cavalry, and I found this somewhere. He made a lot of money. He ended up doing a mining company up in somewhere way out west, Nevada. Go ahead. Now, these are the people that the 3rd New Jersey Cavalry encountered. Rutherford B. Hayes fought with them. William McKinley fought with them. Jubal Early was captured by them. Of course, they knew Lincoln. This is the governor of Virginia, one of the Lees. Which Lee is that? He was severely wounded. And then, of course, there's old Custer and Little Phil. Don't forget Little Phil. Go ahead. This I found yesterday, too. The last reunion was held in Gloucester County, New Jersey, because the Cumberland Greys had signed up as a unit. And this gentleman was the last man standing of the 3rd New Jersey Cavalry. I don't know what the date is. It was later. It's about the 1890s, early 1900s. Go ahead. This is the burial in Vineland where all the Cumberland Greys and 3rd New Jersey are buried together. And I just thought that was interesting. This is the Upper Lehigh Valley Cemetery where my cousin Christian is buried. He went back in the regular army and died at 35, and I don't know of what. His wife had a hat store in Freeland, Pennsylvania, and then moved out to California. And his daughter married a senator. He was Undersecretary of Labor from Hazleton as well. Okay, go ahead. And this is Yekel wrote, which I thought was fitting. And what is the reward of the soldier, the hospital, or the grave in the field where he is hastily buried by a stranger? No one knows him, and he is too far away from the civilized world in order to be recognized by anyone. Strangers undress him and take any valuable memorabilia, and then his bones rot in foreign and inimical soil. Maybe a stone or a bit of wood marks his grave for a short time, but very soon all is sunken in. And if his family actually finds out that he remained in the field, then only rarely do they find out where his grave is. And that was a diary entry. Go one more, Jer. This is the kind of grave that I saw up there. There's no memorial. It's way in the woods. Nobody will find it. It's kind of sad. By the way, the gravestone is issued by the government. Go ahead. Now, I put this together, and I'll take questions as it goes. Just go through it. Hit it one more time. This is a toy soldier. It's for sale. But that's a very, very good picture of what they wore. Imagine wearing now. They had a problem with the hat. Sheridan caught them wearing hats off the dead with the brim because they're riding the horse in the sun and they got no brim. He said, put on the official one. And I just found, here's the headgear. They played with it. They all had their pictures taken. The only problem, how about that one? I colored that up. I thought the guy was looking a little bit crazy. And these two are two different units. This 3rd New Jersey and Private 9th Pennsylvania. I like the way they always tilt. They all played with the hats. And this is really the musicians. They both have the same jacket on, though. And I don't know what the army. This is the Cumberland Greys. All of those went in together because they got money. They finished their 3-year tour. There's a couple of more guys. I don't know. Some of these I don't know who they are. Go. Just any questions? Okay, that's good.
Oh, I have a question.
What?
Why did they decide on the orange and the blue? What was that? Because I think of that, I think of New York, the House of Orange.
I do too, but you know what I think it was? Morrison saw them in Italy.
Oh, okay.
And he copied them because now Morrison is a beauty. He writes a letter after they get the uniform. He said, my men are such good cavalry They don't need rifles. All they need is a sword to charge into
Oh.
battle.
We're gonna run
And
them over.
all I can see is some little German soldier guy. Excuse me.
Yeah, yeah,
Could we have the rifles back,
Yeah,
please?
yeah.
And-
Wait a minute, wait a minute,
Pardon me?
oh, wait a minute, I forgot something.
You're right, exactly. And the funny part of it was, we don't. I met someone from Dover, of all places. The streets in Dover are named after Civil War soldiers.
Hmm.
Searing Street, you know Searing Street, McAllister, McAllister, I think, and Searing was a private, and I found his letter. They were at Gettysburg. They got so shot up
Hmm.
from Dover. 90 of them went, and 6 went up the hill. Their uniforms were tatters from the bullets.
Wow.
And you know what? He got a bill and $3 in the next month to buy a new uniform. So and he said, and no other questions. Keep going. This is a brother. He's buried up in Phillipsburg. He and his brother, and I don't know what they did. This guy is a lieutenant officer. Now you can see. I don't think he's cavalry. He's identified in the pictures. Third New Jersey, but I think the hat's wrong. I think he's Third New York. That's what that looks like. I had one, but I sold it. I sold it honestly to a young man whose grandfather, great grandfather, was in it. He's a reenactor, and he wanted it. There you go. They all look like they're posing. They couldn't move, you know. That's the fellow I know was John Brundage. Who's from Randolph here? John Brundage, Mrs. Brundage's husband from Randolph's grandfather was captured and a prisoner at Andersonville prison and was written up of being so kind to share his little piece of rug with other people. And Charlie Haas from Randolph, his great grandfather was the butcher. And I was doing this presentation in Dover Lutheran Church, and turns out some of Sickles. Anybody ever hear of General Sickles?
Mm.
Well, that's for another time. And there you go. So thank you all for coming.